Welcome to our new grammar lesson, complex sentences. Before talking about complex sentences, we have to know the meaning of the two clauses, independent, and dependent clauses. So we have two kinds of clauses. The first one is called independent and the other one is dependent. Let's start with the independent clause. It makes sense and is a complete thought. For example, when I say the sentence, the cat is sleeping, I can understand the sentence very well. It makes a complete thought. So that's why we call it independent clause. The cat is sleeping. Now let's move to the other kind of clause, which is dependent clause. From its name, dependent, it means it depends on something else, so it is incomplete. Dependent clause needs more information to make sense. Like when you say, when the cat is sleeping, full stop. Do you think it is enough and complete to say when the cat is sleeping and then full stop, finish? No, it is incomplete. That's why we call it dependent clause. Okay, now if you look at the two sentences, the first one, the independent clause and the dependent clause. The independent clause, the cat is sleeping, is the same as the dependent clause, but only that we added to the dependent clause the word when, right? When the cat is sleeping. So again, when I say the cat is sleeping, this is an independent clause. If I added to it the word when, so when I say when the cat is sleeping, it becomes not complete thought. Why? Because when you see when, you think that you have to finish it so you can understand it. So when I added when to the independent clause, it became dependent clause. When is a subordinating conjunction, so I call the word when a subordinating conjunction. Again, let us repeat. When we add a subordinating conjunction to an independent clause, it becomes dependent clause, like this sentence. When I said the cat is sleeping, it was independent, it was complete. But when I added when to it, when I said when the cat is sleeping, now it's not complete anymore. It is dependent clause. What are some other subordinating conjunctions? So we said that the word when is a subordinating conjunction. What are the other ones? You have after, although, because, before, even though, since, unless, until, when, and while. Okay, let's apply what we learned now with our own example. For example, I can say the sentence, I played in the garden. Do you think that this sentence is complete? Yes, I played in the garden. So this is an independent clause. What about if I added the subordinating conjunction after to it? So if I said, after I played in the garden, full stop. Do you think that this is complete now? No, it is incomplete. That's why it became dependent clause. So when I said, after I played in the garden, full stop, this is called dependent clause. By now, I think that we are ready to know about the meaning of a complex sentence. What is a complex sentence? A complex sentence is formed by combining one independent clause and one or more dependent clauses. So, when I put the independent clause, the complete thought, with one or more dependent clause or non-complete thoughts. When I put them together, now we have something that is called a complex sentence. So if I ask you what is a complex sentence, is when you have one independent clause together with one or more dependent clauses together in the same sentence. Let's see an example. Although the boat needed a repair, we went sailing. If you look at this sentence, starting from first of all, although is a subordinating conjunction, right? Yes. And then when you say although the boat needed a repair, until here, this is a dependent clause. And then I put comma, and then I said we went sailing. We went sailing, this is an independent clause. So since we have here a dependent clause and an independent clause together, so that's why I call this whole sentence, I call it a complex sentence. Now let's move to the questions in your book. Write complex is if the sentence has an independent clause and one or more dependent clauses. So if you have the independent and dependent clauses together, we have to write the word complex. Write dependent clause if the sentence doesn't tell a complete thought. So if the sentence is not telling a complete thought, we have to write dependent clause. Like we said, that dependent, it means it should depend on something else. It is incomplete. When you see something that is incomplete thought, you write dependent clause. When you see the both kinds together, it means it is a complex sentence. Let's read number 1. When the boat's rope broke, comma, the boys worked quickly to fix it. When is the subordinating conjunction. When the boat's rope broke, until here, it is dependent clause. And then there is another part. The boys worked quickly to fix it. This is an independent clause. So it means that I have a dependent clause and then an independent clause. Together they make a complex sentence. That's why the answer for number 1 is complex. Let's move to number 3. While the captain carefully watched her. While is a subordinating conjunction, right? And then while the captain carefully watched her. Do you think that this is a complete thought, or you have to think about what happened while the captain carefully watched her? It is incomplete because this is only a dependent clause. So the answer for number 3 is dependent clause. Let's move to the other page, page 133 in your book. Let's read the question. Underline the dependent clause. Write the subordinating conjunction that begins the dependent clause. So here you have to do two things. You have to underline the dependent clause and you have to write the subordinating conjunction. I think that the dependent clause should start with a subordinating conjunction, right? So let's see. We will see the dolphins before we leave. What is the dependent clause? Before we leave, because you cannot say before we leave alone. It is incomplete thought, so it is a dependent clause. This is what to underline. What is the subordinating conjunction? The subordinating conjunction is the word before. That's why we wrote before. I want you here to notice something. Here, we have the subordinating conjunction not in the beginning of the sentence, in the middle. So that's why you can notice that when you have the subordinating conjunction in the middle of the sentence, not in the beginning, no need to put a comma here. No need to put a comma between the independent clause and the dependent clause when the subordinating conjunction is in the middle. So when the dependent clause is in the second part. In this way, there is no comma between the both of them. Let's move to number 2 to see the difference. Here we said, after we eat lunch, comma, we will see more of the zoo. What is the subordinating conjunction? It is the word after. Where is the dependent clause? After we eat lunch. Here we can see that the dependent clause and the subordinating conjunction are in the beginning of the sentence. That's why we need to put comma here before we continue the sentence. So after we eat lunch, comma, we will see more of the zoo. All of this, it is a complex sentence. The first part is a dependent clause, and the second part is the independent clause. Now let's move to the last page in your book. Forming complex sentences. The question is, combine the clauses to form complex sentences. Let's see number 1. Even though he is a dog, full stop. Rover is Lucy's best friend, full stop. Okay, here we have to combine them. We can see that the subordinating conjunction, even though, is in the beginning of the sentence, so the dependent clause is coming first. So here, don't forget that we have to put the comma before moving to the other clause. So when we combine them, we write it like this. Even though he is a dog, comma, Rover is Lucy's best friend. Let's see sentence number 2. She takes Rover to the park, full stop, after she comes home from school, full stop. Here, the first clause that we have is she takes Rover to the park, which is the independent clause. And then the subordinating conjunction is the other one, and the dependent clause is also the other one. So in this case here, do you think we have to put comma? No, no comma. Why? Because the subordinating conjunction is not in the beginning of the sentence. So when we combine the two clauses together we write, she takes Rover to the park after she comes home from school, without any need for any comma. Okay, is it clear why we didn't put comma here again? Because the subordinating conjunction and the dependent clause, it's not in the beginning of the sentence. In this case, no need for the comma. And like this, we finished our lesson.